I'm the history guy. I have a degree in history and I love history. And if you love history too, well, this is the channel for you. In 1945, U.S. Army Air Corps Major Ray T. Elsmore was traveling from Hollandia, which was a major Allied port in Dutch New Guinea, to General MacArthur's headquarters in Australia. Now, the standing orders were to fly around the eastern edge of New Guinea because the interior of New Guinea was still described on maps as unknown. But that day, Major Elsmore was in a hurry because reportedly he had a hot date in Melbourne, and so he decided to ignore the standing orders and fly over the central part of New Guinea. And about 120 miles south of Hollandia, he came upon a heretofore unexplored valley that showed significant signs of a large human population of unknown natives. And that discovery would eventually lead to one of the most amazing rescues in history, and it is certainly a story worth remembering. Further reconnaissance flights saw that the valley was well populated with a number of villages and extensive agriculture. Surrounded by a high mountain range, the Orange Mountains, and sitting at over 5,000 feet, the Highland Valley seemed to be literally untouched by time. Well, quickly stories started to arrive that the valley was populated by giants or headhunters, and that raised people's interest. And so the Army's Far Eastern Air Services Command decided to start flying essentially tourist flights, allowing service members who signed up to climb aboard a C-47 Skytrain aircraft and take a tourist trip over what was then called Hidden Valley. On May 13th, 1945, 5 days after VE Day, a C-47 Skytrain named the Gremlin Special was on one of those morale trips, carrying 24 passengers and crew on a scenic tour of Hidden Valley. At about 3 p.m., the plane experienced engine trouble and crashed into the side of a mountain in one of the most remote spots on Earth. Of the 24 people on board, 19 died instantly. Only 3 people, 2 soldiers and a nurse with the Women's Army Corps, were able to escape the wreck. They went back and were able to rescue 2 more nurses who were grievously injured but still alive. 2 injured, it seemed, as neither one of those would survive the night. For the 3 survivors, Army Lieutenant John McCallum, Sergeant Kenneth Decker, and Women's Army Corps Corporal Margaret Susie Hastings, all seriously injured and still in shock. The situation was dire. McCallum had lost his twin brother in the accident. Hastings had lost her best friend, whose shoes she needed to take in order to survive. They were all seriously injured. 2 had severe burns. They were on the side of a mountain in a jungle too thick for them to be seen by aircraft, 100 miles from rescue, with an area where the natives were completely unknown, and to the south of them there were still thousands of enemy Japanese soldiers. All they managed to recover from the burned wreck were some canteens of water and hard candies. Hastings and Decker's burns were severe. McCallum had a head injury, but they knew that they had to move. They had to at least find a clearing where they had some chance of being spotted. It took them a couple of days before they were recovered enough to move at all, and then about a day and a half to find a clearing about 2.5 miles away. But almost immediately they were spotted by a rescue aircraft that was searching for survivors. The aircraft dropped a couple of life rafts, which gave them cover to get out of the rain, but finding the survivors was not the biggest problem. There was no airfield in the valley, no place big enough to land an airplane. It was too high up, the air was too thin to operate a helicopter, and there were no roads into or out of the remote valley. The same day they were discovered by the natives. The Dani people of the New Guinea highlands were a Stone Age culture. They hadn't invented the wheel. They hadn't invented a number higher than 3. While there apparently had been a small scientific expedition in 1938, most of the Dani had never seen nor even heard of a white person. And while they were neither giants nor headhunters, the Dani could be quite warlike. Well, the 3 survivors did the best they could. They smiled, and they offered the only gift they had, hard candies. And the Dani decided to welcome them. Through sign language, they got the Danny to help them build a fire so that they could stay warm, and the next day another airplane flew over and dropped extra supplies, shoes, and a walkie-talkie so that they had communication, and they got even more supplies in the afternoon, including even lipstick for Susie Hastings. But the situation was still dire. Hastings and Decker's burns were becoming gangrenous. If they did not get medical help soon, they would die. But a plan was in the works. The idea was to drop in paratroops from the 5217th Reconnaissance Battalion, the only operational paratrooper battalion in the area. The 5217 was a covert operations unit that was made up primarily of Filipino-American volunteers. The idea was that they would take in medics and enough personnel that they could clear an area large enough to land a Waco CG-4 combat glider. The Waco CG-4 was a relatively small combat glider that had been used at D-Day and in Operation Market Garden. And it could land in a fairly small space as long as you just cleared it out enough to not, say, have stumps in the way. And what's more, it had a fairly simple grappling system so that an airplane that was flying could fly over, hook a hook on the front of the glider, and pull it to safety. And so the idea was to clear a field, land a Waco glider, put the survivors on the glider, hook it with an airplane, and fly away. And the plan was flatly insane. There was only one unit in the entire theater of operations that had a Waco glider, and the grappling system had never been used operationally. In practice trials, it had failed catastrophically pretty much every time it had been attempted. But lucky for the survivors, paratroopers are also insane. And when Captain Earl Walker, the jumpmaster for the 5217th, asked for volunteers, pretty much the entire unit volunteered. Now, he elected to take with him 10 men, 2 medics and 8 other men, in order to go and protect the survivors long enough for them to clear a field large enough to land a Waco glider and then tow it back out again. And they also paratrooped in a newsreel correspondent. The rescue took 4 weeks. That's how long it took to clear a field big enough for the Waco and for the survivors to recover enough that they could make it down to the base camp. The air at that altitude was so thin that the gliders could each carry only 5 people for the airplane to be able to lift it out of there. And so 3 different times they had to land a glider, fly out, land another glider, fly out, land another glider, fly out, on a procedure that had never successfully been tried before. And yet, all 3 succeeded, and everybody was evacuated successfully. The extraordinary rescue was actually big news at the time. After VE Day, and as the Army was gearing up for a possible invasion of the Japanese home islands, there was a news lull. And especially the specter of a pretty Army nurse trapped in the jungles of New Guinea captured the public's attention. Maybe too much so. At one point, the rescuers actually had to ask for clothes for the other 2 survivors because everybody was so worried about Susie Hastings that within the first couple of days, they had dropped 3 dozen bras for her. You know, this was a situation where things could have gone wrong, and most especially with the Danny. They could be a rather warlike tribe, and yet both groups, the survivors and the rescuers, treated them with such honor that the Danny welcomed them. Had either of them been more militant or more trigger-happy, it could have gone quite differently. When the rescuers first landed, they found themselves surrounded by so many Danny that one of the troopers remarked, "I think I kind of know how Custer felt." And there is a story among the Danny today that says that some of the tribe thought that they had overstayed their welcome and was planning to attack them if they stayed much longer. While lots of things could have gone wrong, they didn't. And certainly that has to do with luck or good fortune, but really the rescue succeeded because of the reason that most things are successful. The people involved kept their head in a difficult situation, they did their jobs, and so they accomplished one of the most extraordinary rescues in history from the valley that the press had decided to call Shangri-la. And while it's pretty much forgotten today, it is still a story that's well worth remembering. I'm the History Guy. Hope you enjoyed this edition of my series, 5 Minutes of History, short snippets of forgotten history, 5 to 10 minutes long. And if you did enjoy it, please click that thumbs up button that's there on your left. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them in the comment section, and I will be happy to respond. And if you'd like 5 minutes more of Forgotten History, then all you need to do is click the subscribe button that's there on your right.